Alright, welcome back to Arcturian Philosophy with Professor Andromeda, otherwise known as me, Krista. Since I was cut off a little bit in the last video, since I'm using my cell phone and really am quite the amateur at this, I figured I would create a bit of a part 2 to my story, where I will go through event by event what exactly happened to lead us to the intercept on August 20th to intercept what would have occurred on the 21st. Now, in the video that I'm going to upload before this, the one that I made originally, I accidentally said October 20th by accident, probably because the months sound similar, or perhaps, well, maybe that could have been a message subconsciously to me that I ought to watch out for October 20th, who knows. But at any rate, I figured I would go through so that those of you who have experienced this yourselves will know you're not alone, and also you'll know what to watch out for and what, in your own, using your own discernment, how you can learn to tell truth from fiction in your specific reality. Because remember, all of your realities are relative, so what's true for you may not be true for me. What's true for me may not be true for you. So the way all of it originally came about was I went on, well, first I activated last March, and I had planned to go on a trip to South Africa, to a conference in Durban, South Africa. I had 2 weeks, or 3 weeks maybe, notice of being told, oh, you are an Arcturian, and you are on the planet to help save the planet. And I was discombobulated for probably an entire week, couldn't figure out how to pack, couldn't figure it up from down. I managed to make my way to this trip, and 2 months later I managed to return home. But, curiously, when I returned home, I felt just a strong desire to talk about what I'd witnessed. One thing that you all need to know, if you live in the United States and you think everything sucks here, you have no idea. If I had stayed in South Africa, I would have died from literally malnourishment. I was not able to tolerate any of the food there. They have their population believing that fluoride is a normal additive in the water. Actually, do I have that water bottle here? I have a water bottle that I brought back from South Africa. The brand is called A Quartz, made by the company Clover. And fluoride, this is supposed to be artesian water deep within quartz rock. And it states that fluoride is bottled at the source there, along with chlorine and nitrates. Yes, and somehow the population is believing that. So, if you live in the U.S., be aware you've got it pretty good. I very happily got back to the U.S., and I thought to myself, wow, I didn't know this was going on in the rest of the world. I found myself stuck in various different places across the globe and realized that something very, very wrong was going on. Something was going terribly wrong. And so I decided, you know what? Up until now, I've never used my real name whenever I've talked about any of this stuff. But you know what? I'm not scared anymore. I decided that I would create a Facebook page using my real name, Krista Howard. Well, literally within less than 24 hours of doing so and talking about geoengineering, not chemtrails, but geoengineering, which is the formal term for chemtrails, which does not lead you to a conspiracy theory, but is a real thing that NASA gives presentations upon that you can look up, and also they're listed on YouTube as well. I found myself being targeted by some people. Now, to be fair, what I did was I wrote some articles on my Facebook at first, using my real name, and then I went, this is going to be interesting for some of you, I went searching on Facebook for Arcturian, Pleiadian, or any starseed related groups. I thought, there's got to be other people like me, right? I mean, I ought to find them. So I found a group curiously titled Arcturians, Pleiadians, Atlanteans, whatever the last group was, I don't quite remember, but actually it might have been Syrians, Atlanteans, and remember, Syrians is a bit of code for reptilian, so Arcturians, Pleiadians, Syrians, Atlanteans probably was the name of that group, and it said that the group was very selective, that you had to really put in effort to get into it. Well, within literally 2 to 5 seconds of trying to join the group, I was accepted to it, and then 5 minutes later, the administrator randomly messaged me with a cryptic-sounding message saying, "I've read your posts, I know who you are, I am RH negative and proud," or "I am rhesus negative and proud," was what they said, and I thought, what? I didn't know what RH negative meant at that time. At that point, I knew that I had Masonic blood, but I didn't really understand the RH negative part, any of that. What I did not know was that this person was trying to lure me in to see if they could possess me. And what was very funny is that it was a female, supposedly, who I was talking to, but I could tell immediately this was no girl I was talking to. I knew that it was a male. I knew that something was just completely wrong. They started to get pretty afraid of me because they started to put up images on their group, and let's just say they were using some kind of software to encode messages into the pictures. And this is funny how I figured it out. All I did was tilt the screen and suddenly noticed that if you tilted the screen, in red you would see some other image, usually a demonic or reptilian or something very strange looking image in the different screens. Or goat's head, the classic symbol looks like this for satanic imagery. And so I tried to talk to this person, and they went by a code name Johnny with a slash to the O, which was to denote 0, actually. Johnny Hampshire, that's a joke on Johnny Appleseed. And Hampshire, I realized, oh, look that up in the Urban Dictionary, that means basically pandemonium. So Johnny Appleseed, instead of spreading apple seeds, he was spreading pandemonium. Very aptly so, because I certainly went through pandemonium after talking to him. Or she. So after that, it was very quickly after that where I thought, okay, I'm not going to be involved with you. But in the duration of talking to the person, they did completely break my laptop, where I had set up my YouTube channel, where I'd been prepared to make my videos, and then bam, the thing just broke on me. Slowly it appeared that telekinesis was involved to do that. It literally came unhinged from itself, where I had not dropped it, and it just did so on its own, practically. So after that, I went to my desktop, I continued to type, and then Facebook got involved. Facebook, the company, actually tried to attempt to tell me that I could not post things, or they would play strange, funny jokes on me, funny to them, not funny to me. As far as the famous neighbors or interesting neighbors that I mentioned, I say famous neighbors because when I was imprisoned, they were making comments about how, oh, her neighbors are famous. I would wager that they're famous because of how skilled they are. That's why I would wager them being famous. When I was trying to, for example, put in an occupation, I tried to put in Arcturian warrior princess. And people put all kinds of funny things in for their occupations. They put unemployed at hustler or wherever, funny things. And they tried to tell me, you can't put that. So I literally just kept on typing it in and in and in and in until finally they said, okay, well you can put that, but you have to put a city. So even though I'm from Los Angeles, I put San Francisco because I left my heart in San Francisco. I live probably about 45 minutes away east of San Francisco, and I still feel like I belong there. So I put in San Francisco, and then bam, the next morning, the people who lived downstairs had been moved out and new people had moved in. And the people who lived across from me downstairs, they had already lived there, but suddenly both of these people downstairs from me, I live on a second story in an apartment here, had SF-49er signs out. And let's just say from there things got very interesting. And this is where some of you may know of Cryon, if you've been paying attention to things like Cryon and Bashar, also word to the wise. Don't really trust Bashar. Take the information, but do not exactly trust your life with that entity. With Cryon, however, I would not be alive were it not for Cryon. What happened during much of it, I began to lose my memory because this is how the mind control works. In order for you to be controlled, you have to have no will and no mind, really. So some of the order of the events is a bit foggy as to how exactly it all played out. But what happened was, as I was trying to type things on Facebook, I was sent the death threats, and I was sent the song, a remixed version of it by people in this people in this group, Arcturians, Pleiadians, Sirians, Atlanteans, a song by Blue Foundation, the Sucker Punch version of Eyes on Fire, and it was altered so that parts that were instrumental were cut out, and the primary phrase there that was being replayed to me was one more word and you won't survive. They played that in my head so many times it wasn't even funny. One more word and you won't survive. And I thought, oh well, you know what, watch me. And here I am. That was what day is today? The September 26th, and we're talking about several days, probably 4 days before August 21st. It was a Sunday, and August 20th was a Wednesday when everything was completed. So between Sunday to Wednesday, there, that was when the show was on the road. So I listened to the threat and thought, you know what? Nope, guys, I don't believe you. You do not scare me. You're liars. But I really wasn't sure what I was gonna be in for. Now, what's interesting is that before this, just before this, I placed an order for let's just say survival necessities. I was thinking, uh-oh, it looks like there's going to be an explosion or something on the 21st. I somehow need to try and protect myself. And I thought that was what was going to happen. It was actually the spirit of my grandfather who prompted me to try to do something about it, to try to find out about it, because he fought in World War II. and his life was spared, or he would have died due to actually something genetic. He had a bunion, and it made him and that made it difficult for him to walk, and they didn't have the same kinds of surgeries or technologies as they do now. So that and one of his friends finally asked him, you know what, you should ask to go, go on to a technician, or working on something technical where you're sitting down. You shouldn't have to walk like this. And he took his friend's advice, asked, and they said, okay, sure, yeah, we're going to move you to a different place. His group then went out into combat, and they were ambushed, and every single one of them died except him. And he came to me, and he said, Krista, this is real. This is real. I've fought in World War II, and you have to try and stop it. You have to do something. You have to try and do something, anything, please. And he actually started crying. This man was not known to cry. And his spirit began to cry, begging me, please, anything, get out, warn people, do anything, try to stop it. And so that was what ultimately prompted me to really try to do something. I thought, okay, well, you know what, if my grandfather who fought in the last World War is saying this is serious, okay, it's probably serious. So after Facebook was quite unhappy with me and the downstairs neighbors moved in, I began to have, well, let's just say lots of things thrown at me in the middle of the night, what appeared to be cursed rubies in triangular shapes, all sorts of things. Also flesh-eating bacteria, Ebola, which apparently I completely fought off, never ended up getting that, though I showed initial symptoms of it. But flesh-eating bacteria was one thing that they tried to hit me with multiple times. And so I remember sitting in my room, which is over there, and I said, you know what, I've noticed a lot of you guys are Italian that I keep seeing here on Facebook. Now, I'm not from the East Coast, but my family is, and I think you guys understand the idea of a sit-down. I think we ought to have a sit-down where nobody gets hurt in the process. And I wasn't really thinking they would honor that, even though mafia types will know the idea of a sit-down, where before a war is about to break out, you try and sit down and resolve the differences. But I didn't exactly know the rules of the communication with these entities. So at one point, finally, I just felt fed up with everything that was going on in the house. And since I live 5 minutes away from where I grew up, I got my keys and said, no, I'm going over there to try and talk to people, figure out what the heck is going on here. So I went out the door, I began to walk, and I walked out of the parking lot, and suddenly I heard a key clank on the ground, but I knew that I was holding the keys in my hand. I looked down, there was no key on the ground, but I knew what key was taken. And it was the house key to where I grew up. I looked, and I saw no key there, and I looked around, I saw neighbors laughing at me. Like I said, I live in an area that is controlled. This apartment that you're looking at is designed to either convert me or kill me. So, I'm living in an interesting situation right now, and how exactly I'm making it, we need to ask Source and Jesus or Sananda, as many Arcturians will say. So I walked, still stubborn as I am, walked over to the house I grew up in, which is only maybe 5 to 10 minutes away, and I tried to knock loudly. I knew that my brother would be home, but at the time I didn't know that my brother was under control. And I yelled for him. It turned out he was home. And I walked, and I looked, and I saw a wood pile in the backyard, and I thought, wait a minute, I've seen that wood pile there before, but this time it was a little different looking. It was different looking because it had a pink bow sitting on it. and next to it were Wiccan or satanic symbols. And I realized, my stepfather has been the one stacking that wood. I remember I've seen it before, but never with a pink little bow on it. Then I walked back out into the front, and I saw a key. This is symbolism that you'll notice in the book of Revelation, the key of David. There was a key that wasn't really meant to open anything, like a lock to a door, but that had the classic symbol once again, like that. It was in the sun and pointed towards a white stone, and because of my research I knew that for those that are turned dark, they receive a white stone with a new name on it. Well, your new name means nothing if you got no brain, and you can't tell anyone your new name, because as soon as you do, they can apparently cast curses on you and kill you, using this satanic version of trapping the light and directing it at people. I was appalled looking at this strange setup, and so I took it off the table and put it into the shade, because I knew that the sun striking it, something to do with solar energy, I knew was also affecting me. I was burning in the sun. Now, some of you, I would like you to listen to the song "Radioactive" by Imagine Dragons. Reptilians look a bit like dragons if you think about it, and they often compare themselves to dragons. In the behavioral health center I was in, they had a picture of a dragon there. And in that song, if you listen to the lyrics, it is talking about the transformation of a human becoming possessed, where I'm breathing in the chemicals, carbon monoxide, I'm shaping up, I'm checking out on the prison bus. They tried to do that to me, where you'll see where I ended up with papers in the house saying "to go," bus ticket, things like that, Amtrak ticket to FEMA camps and such, and I simply ripped them up and threw them in the trash can. Of course, the whoever lives downstairs, and they still are downstairs below my feet, and the people across the way didn't seem to like that very much. But still, I didn't know at the time, because I had the light source, I still had the power to decide. Now, here's what's interesting, what happened. Remember, I asked about a sit-down. So, while I was walking back from the house I grew up in, finding all of this disturbing things, I knew immediately, looking at the wood, that the idea was to burn me as a sacrifice. If you research Satanism, you'll find that when you kill something that is very pure in spirit, and you trap its energy, that is thought to be very easily used, or better used, to place whatever spell or energetic attack that you are trying to create. So I thought, there is no way I am being sacrificed to Satan, and I walked back into my apartment complex another 5 to 8 minutes later, and as I walked, there were some men rolling what looked like laundry carts, and one said to the other guy, "If you want to talk, let's talk." Well, I didn't exactly know the ins and outs of how reptilians communicate, which is they don't actually talk to each other. If they're talking to you, what they'll do is they'll look away and say, "Isn't that a great pizza place over there?" And that means, "I'd like to go eat some pizza," rather than saying to you, "I'd like to go eat some pizza." Don't ask me how they've come up with that. I don't think actually they've come up with that. I think they say it that way because they're terrified. But either way, I just didn't say anything. I had no idea what to do, so I just kept walking. And I realized I was burning in the sun, and as I looked, I realized my apartment was different. And then I realized the trash cans, the dumpsters, were no longer there. One thing about the reptilian dimensions is that they don't have any trash cans or any bathrooms. from what I've noticed. At least the one time that I was there in this actual complex, which is set up ultimately to become something like that dimension, and they think of that as ascending, but all the people were terrified. I realized suddenly, oh my goodness, I'm in a different dimension right now. I walked up to my apartment, my front door right there. It has no doorbell, it's just a knocker. I walked up to it and I could see that someone had installed a nice doorbell for it. I tried my key, tried the lock, it wouldn't open. And I thought, well, you know what, I'm not going to ring the doorbell. I know what's going on, so why don't I just sit down and ask for the sit down part. But as I sat there in the shade, and at random, having different things, like I said, the song Radioactive, different things involving radiation, striking me, different people as they would walk by, staring at me with their eyes, and thinking of some sort of particular attack, which I was not aware of at the time. I just knew that I was getting hit by things all over the place and trying to simply survive. What ended up happening was the way the frequencies worked on that dimension, everything happened so quickly that I simply sat there as people would drive by. I would see people with guns. I would see people who clearly had intentions to kill me. And I would look at them and say, another thing happens, another thing happens, another way, there's another way, it happens another way, another way. And I literally did it that fast because of how quickly things manifested in that dimension. Now, as I walked around, one thing very much disturbed me. I walked around and I saw my mother's car drive by, and it was indeed her. And she was cackling in the car, laughing and waving in a sarcastic fashion at me. I tried to run after her, yelling her name because I knew that it was her. And she, of course, sped off. Now, in this dimension, still, yes, it is her, and my mother is not exactly my mother anymore. She is controlled and possessed. So that was very difficult for me at first to deal with. But I thought to myself, okay, I am apparently trapped in my own apartment complex on a different dimension. No, I'm going back to the third dimension now. And what's interesting is that part of this complex is called bridges. And so I thought, bridging to a dimension. So I walked around the complex in a certain fashion, and suddenly, as I crossed a bridge across water, I found myself suddenly staring at my apartment as it had been, as I'm standing in it. And I heard a voice tell me, if you cross the bridge, you can't come back. And I thought to myself, well, excuse me, you've just told me that if I turn or do whatever, you want to sacrifice me. Excuse me? So I walked without hesitation back across to my apartment and safely re-entered where I am now. So with people that have had time stop and very strange things, found yourself lost on what looks like something that's not your planet anymore, or not your dimension anymore, or suddenly everything is rearranged and you're not astral projecting. It is indeed real, because it finally happened to me. After I got back into my apartment that night, I saw what appeared to be a human, actually a human terrestrial craft. I would say extraterrestrial, but it appeared to be human technology based off of some gray technology that had been traded. That's what it seemed like. I wish I could have gotten a picture, but I wasn't able to get a picture. It was one of the dome the silver disc with the large glass dome on the top and the bright lights around the side. That was the one that I was seeing around here for a few moments. So after that was when things really began to get difficult. I called my family, my brother actually, and I said to him, "Hey, didn't you hear me yelling outside? I know you would have been home. I saw your car there." And he said, "No, you can't come here." And then I thought, oh my gosh, have they gotten to my brother too? Especially when I know that my brother is like me. But as I said in the other video, he was controlled and I managed to resist. So then that night I had what you would call a dark night of the soul. I almost died. And it was actually Cryon. Those of you who might be familiar with the Cryon book series, it was myself channeling Cryon that saved my life, primarily, along with my own intuition. Now, what people should know about the Cryon book series is that ultimately, while Cryon has everyone's best interest in mind, those that control the writing of it, who are not all human, do not have your best interests in mind. And so some of the material is altered to sound true, but Cryon's pretty darn smart. And he had managed to wiggle his way around things so that he could still manage to channel enough accurate information so that people like me could figure it out. Now, because of this, it appears that some things happened to him after I disclosed that he saved my life. But he told me, "Krista, you did exactly what I wanted you to do. You say everything, and I wouldn't have told you any of this if I hadn't have expected you to say everything. You did exactly what I wanted." Part of this has to do with because the entities who were controlling the writing live in constant fear, and he wanted it to be known that they didn't need to live in fear, and he would be an example for them. Now, some of the specifics are a little too weird for weird, so I simply won't mention them. Now, it was after that night, I went through several nights of hardly being able to remember everything. This is from Sunday until Wednesday. Finally, after seeing the prison structures of hell, the way reptilians are, the way their soul streams are trapped in upon themselves, almost like a decadahedron, the way humans are trapped upon themselves in a diamond type shape. Seeing all these things, seeing the abuse, the programming from birth, and all of these, what you might call secrets of hell, as is written in the book of Revelation, which is designed to make reptilians who read the book of Revelation want to kill me. But